Yeah, you learn English every day. Every day means each day? Interesting. Then what does each day mean? Do you not so if every day means each day, then what does each day mean? It. Wait. Okay, I'm waiting. I'm holding. I do have a point of, I do have an opinion about every day and each day. It's not a linguistic or professional thing. I'll share it afterwards. But I still struggle writing some English words and have to look up how correctly spell them. So I would say I'm still learning. Yeah, that's great, right? It's a combination. You're still the word I would use here is you're actively studying. So you're doing a bit of practicing and learning at the same time. I like to use the words. The word study is really great because studying is you know what you need to know, but you don't know it. That like you know what you don't know or have forgotten. That's still practicing. Learning is something you have no idea it existed until now. However, when you combine both of them, studying is the element of combining practicing and learning. So it's great that you're studying English still. Actually, most people don't actively study, as in learn and practice at the same time. They only practice. So for example, oh darn, I forgot this word. But then you think to yourself, wait, what other words mean this word? Then you're actively learning. So for example, if you say every day, and then Durandi said like, oh, but it means each day. It's like, I've never used each day before. I wonder what that means. Then you're learning a new phrase that might be synonymous with each other. However, because I have something to say, I have an opinion about that. I'll share it after. It's a saying meaning to do something repeatedly on every day passing. Okay, that's each day. I accidentally wrote it because I accidentally pressed enter when trying to type. Okay. Yeah, they are not synonymous. Yeah. So, it's great because now we can talk about learning something, right? Like, or I'm practicing this. I've had this conversation before with other people. So every day and each day have different indicators. Every day would suggest a long continuous thing. Each day may suggest that you're taking each day individually as opposed to as a group. So when you say each day you do something, it's not guaranteed that is every day. Because each day you might change your mind. So you try, it's the planning to do it. Every day tends to be in continuous passing, as in you have already done everything every day consecutively. So most people use every day because it's continuous. Each day would imply that each day you're making the same decision. It's a subtle difference. At least that's what would be my use case. So most of the time I would say every day instead of each day. That's not how you view it. I meant they are synonymous because they are used in different parts of a sentence. I study every day versus each day I've been studying. So you can still say I study each day and I study every day versus every day I've been studying and each day I've been studying. That's a difference between your emphasis. So just so you know, you're comparing A plus B equals C and B plus A equals C. So you're changing the position. So you can still say I study each day versus I study every day. And you can still say each day I've been studying or every day I've been studying. That's what you're comparing. You're not comparing those two sentences. You're comparing I study each day versus I study every day. Yeah, but the emphasis are regular put on the front and end based on the sentence being used? Yes. Now you're comparing that. You're no longer comparing each or every. It's confounded. So remember, right? If you're testing a variable, you first compared one variable, just A. But then your example, when you say they're different, you actually introduce the second variable. So this time you both changed variable A and variable B. Variable A is the phrase each day versus every day. Variable B is the position. So your example here is each day is in position 1 and every day is in position 2. This is B, this is A. When you compare every in position 1, so basically A delta B, this means something different too. These two are different. These two create a delta C. In this case, each in position 2 also causes a delta. So you're either trying to prove that the position matters or that each and every are different. So the only way you can compare that is you would take each in position 1 and every in position 1. And that's what I'm comparing. However, you just made a case by comparing each in position 1 to every in position 2. So that is confounded logic. Because the position also changes the meaning as well. So if you put every day I study versus I study every day, it actually changes the meaning of the sentence. So you don't even need to change each. So each doesn't mean the same as every. And then every day doesn't mean the same if you just change the position too. So yeah. And my comment is not dependent on the position. I feel like each day is commonly used as a reflexive sentence, as in each day that I've been, or as in each day I've been studying. Yep. Instead of just I've been studying each day, because then it sounded more natural to say every day. It doesn't sound any more natural or less natural to me. They're both reflexive. They're both reflexive. However, each and every to me varies in intent or passing, which I guess that's what you mean by reflexive, with the passing thing. That's fair. That's fair. That's a really fair opinion. When I read that, I can't tell you that I agree. Like, if you tell me each day you've been studying, right, versus every day you've been studying, I am telling you that, okay, you are telling me that the intent is that at each day you consider studying. And then if you tell me every day you're studying, every day you're studying. This is an absolution. So it's an absolute. It's not it's a collective. So it's a group. It's like a single group unit. Each is individual. So you're actively looking at each day as in individual days, as opposed to all days. So one is stronger than the other. In fact, most people use the indicative form for every most of the time. And just so you know, I'm not talking about that really. I'm okay with you saying they're not the same. I'm not okay with you saying that delta A and delta B are the same as just changing delta A. That's not true. So you're changing two different things when you say you're used to saying each day I've been studying instead, and then I've been studying every day. Those are two different factors. So you're actually changing two different things about the sentence, not one thing. It's not just, in my opinion, sorry, I know this sounds a little gaslighty, but at least we can agree position matters. Of the phrase position matters because you already told me if you put in the front, it has more emphasis, or like the emphasis changes if you put in the front and the end. So you've already demonstrated to me that you can qualify that a change in position. Didn't I say they weren't the same? Yeah, they weren't the same. Did I say you said they were the same? I'm pretty sure I tried to say they weren't the same. It might be my accent. So with delta and alpha, no, what I'm saying is you are giving, this is your example where you change delta. Oh, actually, I see where the misunderstanding is. So each and every are not the same. They are not the same. That's axiomatic. So that's what we assume. A, right? So it's represented by A. Right? So this is the thing that you're talking about. So A, the condition is if you choose each or every. But there's a second condition you introduced, which is position. Right? So this is each and every. This is position. So your example is that you naturally use each in position 1, which is at the beginning, and then you tend to use every in position 2. I feel like each and every can be synonymous in some contexts, but one is selective and the other is collective. That's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. It can be synonymous in context. The thing is, you are changing the B. So when you're making an argument and you're trying to say these things are different, the example would have been each day I study versus every day I study. Then I would logically agree with you that a great example, this example produces two different meanings. It produces a delta A. It doesn't create A equals A, in my opinion. And then you say some context will produce synonymous things. It's like, yeah, I say that. I didn't say one was more wrong than the other. I didn't say you didn't. I just meant that one way is more common to say, okay. Can you, like, pause. Pause. In no way did I use the word wrong. Now I could record and I can guarantee you with 100% that I did not say the word wrong. So Do not infer that. I'm suggesting that when you're just clear, I never said you called me wrong. Okay. Fair enough. I just meant that one way is more common. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is that not what I'm saying? You just... I'm pretty sure I just said you are more likely... You liked the idea of using each in position 1. And you like every in position 2. You're suggesting that, right? I don't think I'm incorrect about that. Hopefully not. My suggestion is when you're trying to compare each and every, you don't also change the position. Because then you have... The meaning might change because of position and not proving or suggesting an example in which each and every has different meanings. Well, it is your way. You just said it. It feels natural to do that. Unless you're sharing an opinion and you just made a disclaimer to me like, this is not my opinion. Like, if you're telling me it's not your opinion, then I suppose you're sharing other people's opinion. But whatever it is, you're inferring it's your opinion. You just said, I feel I just meant that one way is more common to say in natural English, and I figured you're projecting your opinion. But, alright, I could be wrong about that. I'm sorry if I inferred your opinion by what you said naturally. But I meant it feels natural to me. Okay. So I was not wrong about that. Because that's how I most often see. Which kind of makes it my opinion due to others, but also I've been taught it. Fair enough. I can tell you from my personal opinion, I think people in casual speak use these synonymously. And there is a selection bias for everyday. Period. In my experience. In my experience, rarely does the phrase each day happen compared to every day. It's either every day I study or I study every day, regardless of the position. However, it's about delta B. So position, emphasis is where I see the most variance. So when someone really want to emphasize every day, then they'll say every day I study. If they want to emphasize studying, then they'll say I study every day. I don't hear each day too often. Like, each day I go on a run versus every day I go on a run. Every day tends to be very strong. It promotes positive commitment, and consistency. So whenever someone's talking about themselves, they like to exude consistency. Take care, Sandra. Take care, Sandra. Each day is a bit more dubious. So when people express something that's positive, like they desire someone to know, they would use every day. And when they don't want the thing that they don't want to do, as in running, like I need to exercise. So oftentimes the subtext is if someone really likes to exercise and they think they're positive, it's a positive thing, they are likely to say I exercise every day, or every day I exercise. However, say like chores, where it's like take out the garbage. I don't know. Maybe take out the garbage. I don't think people take out the garbage. It's a bad example. Each day I take out the garbage. Or I take out the garbage each day. At least that's my opinion. Don't forget your previous message. I'm not going to forget. I have to finish the idea first before I actually read more things. But thanks for the indicative command that you're using. I feel like every has been lessened in importance, so it can mean each, just like how literally has gotten to be more figurative most of the time. That's fair. I feel like because every has been devalued in common speech, every can be synonymous in a lot of ways within. That's fair. I can see that. So in everyday speak, I'm gonna say the internet culture. I'll provide I think that's a very fair reason. I'm gonna provide a counterpoint. Nowadays, internet has hustle culture language, especially in English. So typically, hustle culture motivates motivates totality, as in it motivates full commitment a lot of times. So on the internet, they tend to use very strong words still. So yes, it's become devalued because of how common it is, in my opinion. So every, all, always, same. These words are incredibly common in the internet hustle culture. And in my opinion, it coincidentally lines up your idea of devaluing. But everything is also literal. And so to me, I would say this is actually getting closer to replacing a lot of the things. So it's being devalued in that way. The act of prescribing precise meaning to the arbitrary ethereal statement of irrational emotional beings is quite the academic pursuit. Indeed. Well said, Lotus. That was highly esoteric of you. However, I absolutely love the confidence in which you executed that statement. Yeah, so this is what I mean by generally speaking, I would agree with you that you're making a distinction between every and each. And I also agree with you that these words are being devalued. However, my take on why they're devalued is often because of the need for absolutes. And oftentimes it's the indicative speech that is pervasive on the internet. Much like the way you debated with me. Pretty much most of your statements are passed off strongly as indicative. Because you do that. You are part of the internet culture. Do I sound like that? Sometimes. But generally speaking, I like to use the subjunctive. So, like, yeah, once you step back, you're going to say it depends, it's on context, but you don't speak as though it depends on context. You speak as though it is the facts. It is this. It has gotten this. As opposed to, I'm not quite certain that, well, English is pretty direct. That's what we're talking about here. English is direct on the internet. It's incredibly direct. So coincidentally, I'm not saying it deals with your Dutch side. I'm not making assumptions, but the way you present your case is incredibly challenging. It's nice. You clearly know what your opinions are and you project them. And I'm not part of that group, I suppose. I try not to be. So I use words like try, alternative, counterpoints, and whatnot, right? And explanatory things, as opposed to, yeah, I feel ya, man. That's exactly it. I feel ya. Or, yeah, that's, everyone thinks that. Yeah, it does feel like, or I can't even say it does feel like, it's all like this. Yeah, you're right. I don't say those statements very often. It's very direct And it devalues things. It devalues a lot. So when I say you were suggesting an opinion, I was telling you that I was inferring your opinion. However, you took it literally. And then when I said I didn't literally do this, then you corrected me on saying I didn't literally do something. Fair enough. However, I was trying to infer and talk about what your statement means to me, not inferring that it's fact. So that's very direct. And yes, that is very much the type of interaction I expect on the internet. You're often very subjunctive. I appreciate subjunctive people. Well, although you did mention that you're Dutch and that's why you're very direct. Do Dutch talk indicative all the time, like outside of the internet culture? No hard feelings. I'm not suggesting that. This is fantastic. I love these discussions. It's super deep. Although Lotus pulled out a hat trick with using ethereal statements of irrational emotional beings is quite the academic pursuit. Hey, ASJ from YouTube. Literally has gotten more of a confirmation meaning, yeah. Yep. Or gain, and also gained the meaning. I would say not even or. I would go as far as literally has salience in confirmation, and it's gained the meaning of figurative. If you know what I mean. It's a catch-all phrase. So yes, I would say lots of words, due to the repetitious nature of the internet, has simplified to a point where it basically means everything and you have to infer the nuance. How am I? Delta what? That's a lot of spam. Interesting. That's a lot of spam. Sorry, spam from YouTube. I'm Dutch. Dutch culture tends to be direct. There are sociological reasons though. Historically, why you're direct. I see. I feel like what you're saying is a microcosm of the current state of my culture. Interesting. Many things are taken to the extreme and thus the power of those extreme is weakened. I see. Do you ever notice that, Lotus, on the internet? And when we're talking about the culture, right? We're talking about the culture. Just as a background, Lotus, you're referring to American, right? Because I'm American, by the way, Gerandi. I don't know if you noticed that. So we're specifically talking about a very regional thing. If I'm not talking about the internet, if I'm not talking about the internet, I'm talking about the regional thing. Where I am, it's very ambiguous. Yeah. So where I am now, IRL, it's incredibly ambiguous. So lots of subjunctive speech outside of the internet. Yeah, I got a lot of spam on YouTube. That's fine. I'll just ignore that. But here, yeah, on the internet though, most things are indicative. Indeed, as I've gotten older, I appreciate more the power of contrast. Yeah. Can we turn this into a digression? I think we've talked about it enough, so let's talk about this before I start the new unit, because the new unit is gonna be a lot of me trying to figure things out, right? So, what are your feelings about the internet? I guess use. I think it's pretty funny that you mentioned literal, right? Here's the thing that let's do some fun things, right? A lot of times I feel when people here's one that I think the internet thing happens a lot. When someone is trying to express the subjunctive, right? The subjunctive. However, when they do, they use the indicative. Like on a comment or something. For example, I was just talking about this a little before. When someone says, their method, I'm gonna paraphrase. This is a paraphrase. Their method is actually even more so. They said they know the best method. Okay? The best method to learn Japanese. We're gonna make this relevant to Duolingo. They know the best method to learn Japanese. Now, they didn't say they use the best method. They know the best method, so that they don't take responsibility for the use case. They're inferring that there are more people that agree with this. And then they end with the indicative form and say, Duolingo is useless. Okay? So, the problem with this, the thing that, not really problem, the way I'm interpreting this is not what was written. In my honest opinion, this person is probably trying to be helpful. Like, have, I don't know, an honest attempt to try to provide save me some trouble, right? And then at the same time, when they try to express that they're only trying to help, they use the indicative form as an expression of fact, as opposed to a suggestion, right? So when they say they know the best method, which comes up in conversation a lot, they're inferring that they did research and other people, a lot of people collectively, every agrees as a collective it's the best method, and therefore it leans credibility to their statement. When I read that, they're inferring that it is the best method. They're not communicating that it is the one. So I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, right? Until I read the last comment and it says Duolingo is useless. That is the indicative form being used as to factualize their opinion, which happens to be a subjective statement. And that subjective statement requires the subjunctive. What does that tell me instead? Well, this person is a product of the internet hustle culture. So what do I do when I read this comment? I take it with even more grains of salt. Or is that not how the idiom works? Probably. I don't know. Like, I take it with more salt because I like salt, I suppose. I often prefer directness when talking to other Dutch people or people in general, even when others talk direct to me. When people talk subjunctively toward me, it often comes off as scared and anxious. That's fair. That's fair. That is definitely one that makes subjunctive. It's a stereotype, and I would say the stereotype in this case is likely statistically correct. They would probably have apprehension and insecurities if one is to use the subjunctive. Being direct shows you aren't shy to speak out and you dare to speak the truth. That's a leap of logic, but I can see where you're coming from a subjective point of view. Instead of being more likely to be disingenuous, again, a stereotype, but now I'm only seeing one-sided emotional arguments between disingenuous being considerate. So the opposing counterpoint is considerations, as opposed to being disingenuous. When you're being when you be speaking subjunctive the entire time. I see. Duolingo doesn't teach you Japanese. It's more of a daily practice and learn vocabulary slowly throughout and get a grip of the basics. You should always use other sources to continue learning and try to speak more often. And there we go. The internet hustle culture in the indicative form, which I respectfully disagree with you. However, much like the Japanese culture, Jirandi, I humbly take your advice and your subjective opinions that you are passing off as facts because you are using the indicative form. And I would say in the future, I will consider other sources. I am going to tell you that I disagree with you in the indicative form and suggest that there are a lot of things that I would want to share. However, you came off as incredibly direct and potentially narrow-minded enough for me to be scared of you in terms of sharing my opinions. So if you want to think that someone who is using the subjunctive is habitually scared and disingenuous, then you're going to probably have an incredibly selective and emotional bias towards someone like me, who is, for all intents and purposes, 60% of the time more so in the subjunctive. Yeah. So when you said all those statements, I can already tell that I will use the subjunctive towards any of your remarks. So if you feel that the people around you constantly use subjunctive, or you avoid people who are constantly subjunctive, then I know that you have a prejudice towards them. You view them as disingenuous as opposed to being considerate. Well, one thing the Japanese culture does very well in public is that they use the subjunctive naturally in their language to be polite. So if you go around and you look at a Japanese person, are you suggesting that they are being disingenuous or feeling scared? Because I would say it's kind of yes and a no. As an Asian person in public, I have a fear and insecurity of saving my face. It's part of the face culture. So we use language that are indirect to remain polite. Is that being considerate or out of fear of, being misjudged, right? So I can see that in your culture, at least the Dutch, as from your description, that directness comes off as a positive thing. In Asian cultures, even in Japan, directness may come off as rude. So when you go and tell me what you just stated, pushing off as fact that Duolingo doesn't teach you Japanese, that is rude, it's condescending, and you're gaslighting me to thinking what it is as opposed to suggesting what it could and could not be. And I am most absolutely certain the next thing you're going to type is a glossary of the qualifications of your experience. You're going to try to convince me that, I've used this for 5+ years, internet hustle culture. I've been in education for whatever. I'm a self-proclaimed linguist, and these are my thoughts, and you should take them because it provides weight. Using the indicative form and continuously not establishing rapport with the person you're speaking to and talking to them as though you have the higher ground. I just saw a block of text, so I'm assuming that's it. I'm not narrow-minded. You don't get to choose that. However, fair enough. If you don't consider yourself narrow-minded, that's fair. You can reject my opinion. That's perfectly fine. You've learned Japanese via Duolingo as well. When did you use it? I just spent the last 1 hour talking about new updates to Duolingo, but that's okay. So when did you use it? You spent 5+ years learning French. Awesome. That sounds like you're multilingual. And yes, Duolingo has taught me a lot about French. Extra awesome. Making light comments about Duolingo doesn't make you any more likable to me, right? Because you are prejudiced towards people who use the subjunctive already. You've established that. But I feel like the French course is also way more developed. That's a fair statement. Courses do vary in its development cycle and how much development with respect to each course. If I had to guess, Duolingo probably has a compartmentalized development cycle where they have different separate teams working on different courses. So patches and rotations go out based on the progress of the teams. So naturally, they would probably vary in quality. And also, it is a development cycle. And you needed to use other sources. I agree. I also use other sources, of which I mention proudly and wonderfully, because Tofuku is an incredibly wonderful site. And not just apps, but also to read that Duolingo sometimes forget to teach you as grammatical context. I agree. They do not include things like grammatical context. Forget, I'm not considering that idea. That is a assertion again of an opinion and an ad hominem argument. So you are suggesting that the people themselves have forgotten something. They may have forgotten something, or perhaps choose not to include it as part of their design. So you don't know for sure if they did. That's an ad hominem argument. And interacting with language are truly important if you want to quickly improve at it. And I'm not doing that apparently. But I mean, I agree with you. Truly important is to interact with the language. I think that's a blanketed statement that is wonderful to be promoted, and I hopefully inferred by many language learners. And speaking is known to make you sound more natural. Indeed. That's beyond the scope of evaluating Duolingo. However, I agree with you. So your many years of experience of learning other languages, I agree with most of your points. Regardless, it does not vindicate your lack of emotional intelligence when talking to someone who's evaluating a product and introducing criticisms that are beyond the scope of the product and suggesting that you are not having an agenda in mind, right? So, first of all, have I established that my goal is to be fluent? Second of all, all these projections are inferring something that's useful to me as well, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't be sharing this. So I'll respectfully share counterpoints. Duolingo is not the same as when you used it for Japanese, probably, because it's not the same for me already from day one. In fact, I just went out and said my day 26 video is out of date. It is officially out of date because of something that happened probably 2 days ago and even today. So I have to adjust for the next update. So if you used Japanese to learn Duolingo, are you confident that is up to date? As someone who is very direct and someone who sounds like they like to be incredibly precise, can you truly use the indicative form with confidence that you know exactly what Duolingo is like for Japanese at this very moment? Because I'm not even confident in that, and I've only used it for 43 days. Some things did fundamentally change today, and I've highlighted that here. And it's a great thing because I'm going to illustrate it today, where they went through the kanji and then tell you when kanjis appear multiple times. It's a thing that I've been rehearsing for the last 20 plus days because they didn't do this. And when I logged in today, or when I got on today, it's here. So while you're saying all of these things, I imagine that you are also taking into consideration that your opinion that you're pushing off as an indicative projection of your opinions, are they accurate? So respectfully, I think whatever you learn with your experience in Duolingo, me, Lotus, and Indy have been interacting, learning Japanese together, because all three of our experiences are different with Duolingo. Actually, I don't know if Lotus and Indy talk to each other about how their experiences are similar, but my experience is dramatically different from theirs. So the question is, when did you learn Duolingo with Japanese? And you also already know this is true because you said you learned with French, and the French course is more developed, way more developed, I guess you're saying, compared to every language course, as opposed to each language course. So you're comparing like, oh, it's more developed in general compared to the rest of them. Well, is it more developed than Japanese now? That's a better question. You clearly learn Japanese and French at a different time span. So before we go into all of that, that's another talking point. So there are many talking points. And then I already mentioned the talking point about Duolingo sometimes forgets to teach you grammatical context. Well, Duolingo itself, the product, can't forget anything it's designed not to do. And then the leap of logic here is assuming the developers, which is an ad hominem argument, forgot to include those grammatical contexts, right? You can only infer that, not state it as a fact. So while we all appreciate the nuances of other languages, especially Japanese, the very nature of the thing you're speaking, how you're speaking, is exactly the point I'm making about the internet hustle culture and the interactions I have with the internet. The predominant use and devaluing of precise, heavy language. When you say something, sometimes Duolingo forgets something, is suggesting that a product is forgetting something, but you're actually saying the people are forgetting something, which deflates the weight of your language. And you probably dislike politicians. You probably dislike people like me. And the more I speak, you're probably having some feelings of someone who's not giving exact answers, but offering counterpoints and diminishing the things you're saying, because that's the element of the subjunctive. So many times and so many statements you've made is subject to interpretation. I accept everything that you say about you specifically as fact. So you have spent 5+ years learning French. You have learned French. You have used Duolingo to learn Japanese and French. Those are accepted. I have no questions. I'm not even going to try any ad hominem arguments. I'm not trying to attack your credibility. The things you state are almost not even indicatively true. They're a projection of opinion that you fail, in my opinion, that you might have failed to present in the subjunctive. So do I agree with you that Duolingo sometimes forget to teach grammatical context? I agree to some extent. And then I disagree in a lot of extents where someone says, oh, they should have included this grammar point. It's like, well, they demonstrated it here. They didn't say it explicitly, but they definitely said it implicitly by design. So if we were going to go and leap over and do ad hominem arguments, then yes. Like, for example, having a na statement, a statement that uses a na adjective or the adjective in its na form right next to a statement in the same prompt with that adjective not in the na form or without using the na particle. That is an implicit demonstration of an explicit grammatical context in which they did not explain. I feel like you've been slightly nitpicky, but I get it. Hey, you were nitpicky too. So you were telling me that you dislike how words are being devalued. How can you not enjoy nitpicking? That's how you impart, in my opinion, that's how you impart and differentiate the value of words. We are obviously language learners. So if you weren't expecting that, I apologize. However, your words are your words. With Duolingo forgetting to teach stuff, I meant that they are clearly things some students might struggle with to grasp when they're not included in a good description on how to use it, but you always have other online. Yes, exactly. I agree with that. That is a very excellent subjunctive. That is an excellent, well, maybe not. Okay, here's more nitpicky stuff, I suppose. With Duolingo, with the statement that you've made about Duolingo forgetting to teach stuff, right? To include stuff, or with Duolingo omitting or lacking certain things for teaching stuff, you meant to clearly state that students may struggle. I like that. May struggle, subjunctive, to grasp what they've, when they may or may not include a good description on how to use it. And that's fair. I did not experience that. So clearly I'm not one of those students. Fair enough. And then you can always you can always have other online resources to explain those. And I am fairly confident there are other resources. Now, I will defend those students as well. I would suggest that they may not always find other online sources. So if I were to argue against Duo, these students may not end up going on to find other resources. And that is why you're worried. Also, don't correct me on how I'm speaking, direct or subjunctive. It's all a different way we speak. There's no right or wrong. I didn't correct you. I'm suggesting. Because it's not how you're speaking, it's how you're speaking to me. So I'm explaining how I want to say things, because I'm making sure that I don't misinterpret you. My nitpickiness, oh, well, I'm sorry if you feel like correcting towards you. Fair enough. I guess I'll stop exchanging my opinions and suggest that I disagree with you. Almost all of it. So instead of correcting you, or instead of suggesting any more in-depth things, I can say that you have an arrogance about you, and you and I do not share the same opinions. So take it for what you will, I suppose. Since I'm not going to correct you, I'll share you my opinion. You have an arrogance, you're prideful, and you talk to me like a condescending person. So instead of suggesting anymore. Kind of mean towards you? Okay. I apologize for making it mean towards you. So if I'm being direct with you, so instead of trying to be indirect, I'll be direct with you. You're arrogant, you're prideful, you push opinions onto other people, and you project your opinion like they're fact. So I'm not concerned with your language anymore. The fact that you came up to me and you told me that Duolingo doesn't do certain things, I disagree with you. How do I explain that? Well, I clearly can't counter argue what you said. So what do I do? Is what I'm asking. How can I demonstrate to you that I actually care about what you said without saying that? Did you read my message about feel like you've been slightly nitpicky? I did. I literally said it too. And I'm literally using literally. If you check out the guidebook, they give pretty good explaining on grammar and tips for your unit you're on. Yeah, and by the way, Indy, they actually rearranged a lot of the guidebooks. Thanks, D3. So you're gonna try to gaslight me now. Fair enough, I guess. I mean, thanks. Oh, thanks, D3. I appreciate it. So I clearly didn't read any of your messages. So not only did I am somehow. I've got a sub button. Yes. I guess I'll end this because obviously not only can I not read your messages, you expect me to read your messages. No, you're not gaslighting. I just didn't read. I mean, I read every message very, very carefully. That is why I'm nitpicky. But if that makes me mean to you, I'm sorry. Like, I really am sorry. That's how I show people that I really care about what they said. If your feelings are hurt about it, then I'm gonna stop. That's probably all I'm gonna do. I can't do anything. I can't convince you that I care about what you say without caring about what you say. Right. Oh, D3 is your friend, Nojo? Nice. Try learning some German, man. Multilingual. German could be a possibility, D3. German could be a possibility. Right now, though... Oh, you showed my channel, Nojo? Thanks. I appreciate it. Right now, my plans are Japanese, Mandarin, and Spanish. Maybe, like, in a year, D3. Are you German, D3? You just asked if you read it already because it might have given extra context to the conversation. Did you read my message? Okay, that's fair. I misinterpreted that. The question is yes. The answer is yes, I did. I'm being nitpicky. And then I'm continued to be nitpicky. German is common where you speak D3. Nice. Are you learning anything else? D3? I'm not gonna resume the conversation, Randy. I think you have very valid points. And I acknowledge almost all those points. Like, all the things you're inferring are probably true, to some extent. I disagree with a lot of them too. And there is something to be said about going to someone and telling them that Duolingo doesn't teach Japanese, and knowing that that person has said the opposite for a really long time and expecting that person not to be nitpicky about what you said. I think there's a dissonance there, in my opinion. So did Duolingo teach Japanese? Well, I don't know anymore. What do you consider teaching Japanese? Japanese common phrases, and I can read about 200 kanji characters? Nice. Very nice. Polish, Spanish, and French. Whoa, how long have you been learning language, D3? I wish I can put a number to how much kanji you know. Well, I can put a number to mine right now. Let's see. 7. 19. Yeah, 19. Oh, and I gotta make sure I don't count this row anymore. 19. 25. Oh no, 26. 33. 37. 41. 45. 48. I can probably do them in total recall. 48, I guess. Plus like 4 or 5 that other people taught me. Like ski des. Or just ski in general. Ski. Personally, my addition on this country, you can't learn a language without living in the country. Interesting. So that means that anyone who learned English as a second language has to live in the United States and Great Britain in order to learn English. I see. Oh, unless you're talking about a country that offers the language. Okay. And then I've been in quite a few countries. In Germany, I was in around 2016, 2018, and 2019. And then Poland in 2018. Wow, that's a lot of... Yeah, that's a lot of Europe. Spanish, you're learning... I meant be there. Personally, you can't learn a language without being in the country. Okay, fair enough. I clearly don't know Fujonese and Mandarin because I haven't, you know, truly been there in China. So I don't know what to tell you. I guess I just don't know Fujonese. Okay. I think becoming conversational is great, but I try to say there will almost certainly be gaps in someone's Japanese if they stick to just using Duolingo. I agree. That is a great statement using the only clause. Or now is okay, I'm sorry. Last one. I promise I won't nitpick anymore. I promise I can't promise what I can't keep. But the word just has been relegated to only. So it has consumed the word only. And I agree with you. If Duolingo is the only thing you use, there will most definitely be gaps in someone's Japanese. Absolutely. And in my, and from what I've heard, other opinions, Duolingo alone, again, yep, alone, I agree. I still agree. Is by far not the most efficient nor effective way of learning a language on its own. Is by far, okay, I disagree with that. I won't say much more other than I disagree with that. And I've never called Duolingo bad. I agree. And then again, never. So never. That's absolute. So I agree with you that I have never heard you call it bad. Like, I never heard you, up to this moment, use the word bad. And I encourage it. You never call Duolingo bad, that's fair. But I feel like it's more of a start where you can branch out from, but still use it. That's a fair statement. I agree with that. So fair enough. So overall, I agree with you. If you're saying if you're only using one tool, I agree. You never said bad. I agree. You inferred bad, though, a little bit. That's just my personal opinion. And yeah, definitely. And I disagree that you say about efficiency. That's fair. I mean, that is the opinions that I'm getting. I think 90% of the opinion, I read the same thing that you do. This is the opinions of others. I agree with you on that. Like, a large majority of people would say it's not efficient or even the most efficient, which is, again, talking about absolutes. Right. Most efficient. And most effective. I agree with you. I think there are rarely anything, if I wanted to share my opinion, I think there's pretty much not many things that are either most effective or most efficient in any regards. So that's fair enough. That's a fair statement. I wouldn't say that about Duolingo either, that it is the most efficient nor most effective. I wouldn't say that about any tool, actually. Probably 90% of tools, I would not say they are the most efficient and most effective, whether they stand alone or with others. Yes. Fujonese. Fujonese is the language. So, Fujonese is my first language. Although I can't read Mandarin, so you're right about that, I suppose. I can't. Well, did you say speak, or did you say hold conversation? I can't learn a language without being in the country. That's fair. I didn't learn the language without being in the country. I learned it from my parents, so perhaps. Kanji. Okay, those are the kanji. I'm probably around 450. It's a lot. I only have 50. How does it feel to be 450? Oh, interesting. You're gonna have to share with me the app that tells you how much kanji you know. That's gonna be... I guess that's ones I know how to write. Reading is more... Okay. Fair enough. Keep up the good work. Yeah, Nojo every day. Nojo says keep up the good work every day on YouTube. It's actually quite wonderful. So thank you. Thank you, D3. You're going through my sentences like it's an exam. This feels so weird. I mean, I care about what you say. I like to hope that I care about what you say. This is how I show something, right? Not a lot of people are still here, so you're still here. I reckon maybe it's useful. I organize my thoughts like this. I'm sorry if this is alien to you, but I like to make sure I read Japanese and other languages like this. I really do care about people's words. And just to present my case, I don't quite like how the internet hustle culture has devalued language, especially English. The internet hustle culture has devalued English for the longest time. So how do I demonstrate, or what I choose to demonstrate the importance of being articulate and exacting with English on the internet? I read people's statements and I organize the thoughts in my head visibly for other people to know. So when I'm using like reviews and articles, I write on screen because I don't want the idea that English is a devalued language, which happens a lot. So when you willy-nilly throw statements around, I like that to be the opportunity to demonstrate how I'm either confused or having the wrong idea. So if any of this is having the wrong idea, someone can point it out. Like, oh, well, that's not what I mean here. Or let me clarify here for you, because I'm removing confusion if I write my thoughts out. That does come off as being really nitpicky though. And I have been accused and insulted for being condescending, pedantic, esoteric, and having a stick up my butt. That was day 8, by the way. It's infamous. The day 8 stick up my butt. So this is what I do. I'm an educator too. At least I consider myself an educator. So if you're a teacher, if you're an educator, you're gonna feel like you're in a seminar. That's how I process things. So I apologize for that in advance, but at the same time, I'm not going to take it back. Respectfully. I feel the most efficient way would be to hire a language tutor and take actual courses, or read a book and take online courses. Interesting. All right. Have you done that? Is that what you do? I corrected it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry. I can read the context of the English perfectly. All right. Quick question. What am I using to write on? I'm using a thing called, hang on, Crank Monkey. I'm using, wait. I think I can actually show this on here. Where's the, it's called Web Paint Tool. That's all it's called. It's called Web Paint Tool. It's not the script, but it's an extension. It's a Chrome extension that I'm using. It's literally just called Web Paint Tool. It's the one that I found that was most reasonable. There are others like Draw Me or something, but this one I found it's good enough. It has a latency problem though. So if you're using a stylus, if you're using or a tablet, on a desktop, it does have latency issues. So if you write too quickly and you lift your pen too much, it'll do this stuff. And it could cause it to erase things. So as a fair warning, it's not a substitute in my opinion. It's difficult to substitute it for like Adobe Photoshop or something that, a drawing program. It has a lot of latency issues. Higher, not higher. In the end, efficiency and effectiveness doesn't matter much if you're not having fun. It's all about fun with language learning, in your opinion? That sounds great, Sheriff. Sheriff Morax. I will share my thoughts on that. In the end of the day, for me, efficiency and effectiveness is about more experiences and novel experiences that may include learning, and fun is secondary to me. I learn that things are fun because they are new and novel and learning. So why am I using Duolingo? Is to have these discussions. It's one of the journeys of using Duolingo. I didn't pick Babbel, LinkedIn. Well, there are other obviously pragmatic restrictions on doing other things that are reputable, but Duolingo has a pragmatic openness that allows me to have conversations about it. So then I can hear all the opinions of other people. Duolingo is a divisive learning tool, and it promotes discussion for my purpose. So the efficiency and effectiveness of me learning to learn is my goal, not necessarily to become fluent in Japanese. I've communicated this hopefully at least once every week. Learning Japanese is salient and important because it's the process of learning language, learning a secondary language. If that means never going to the country, but still learning something third hand amongst secondary language learners, then that's great. One day, maybe once in a blue moon, a Japanese person comes up to me and asks me a question, do you speak Japanese? And in the English foreigner perspective, you are in the United States. And I am so happy that I can use my Japanese to talk to you. Yes, it's not the same as having the privilege to go to a country, live there long enough, and, I don't know, become a true fluent or native person. That's not a privilege I have. I would wish to have that privilege. Perhaps if my priorities were different, I would travel the world. My priorities is not to travel the world or to have someone tell me that, oh, my Japanese is really fluent. Have you been to Japan? It's like, yeah, I lived in Japan for 5 years. That to respectfully decline that if you think how long you do something, where you have been, affects my respect for you as an academic person who's willing to spend some time to talk to me, it's negligible. If you've been all around the world, it's still negligible. I still respect you. So when you share an opinion and you're willing to share and take my conversations, right? That's all the respect. Like, that's far exceeds any amount of legacy you have. I could be a billionaire and I will still not use that as a way to give me credibility. You're a human being. And I like to say I mutually want to give you the time and day. So effectively, it boils down to the whole, do I have good intentions? Well, I try to have good intentions. If they're nitpicky and it's not to your cup of tea, then I can think of a lot of brilliant polyglots out there who would love to hear your take that resonates with them. So content creators are 1 in a billion. Not even, I'm exaggerating. 1 in a million or 10 million. So I reckon if I don't provide the open-mindedness that you require or want, because many people that I've talked to constantly say they're open-minded, and that's fair enough. So stay a while, listen to my rants if you want, or go and I hope you find someone who resonates with you, which means that you're more close-minded, by the way. If you're looking for someone to resonate with you, I'm generally one that doesn't even resonate with my own self. My opinions change very rapidly. The dynamics of my opinion and knowledge base changes very rapidly because I don't aim to master certain things. I aim to learn certain things or continue learning things. So if it feels like I have gaps in my Japanese knowledge, that's because I intend to trade it off to getting generalized knowledge versus specialized knowledge. So when someone tells me about min-maxing efficiency and efficacy, that's often from the perspective of a narrow-minded, singular, but focused and passionate goal. Okay? So, yes, I am very inefficient because my goal is not focused. You can only min-max, in my opinion, it's easier, human condition, to focus and improve efficiency and efficacy if you have established that your goal is to do something that is very narrow. My goal is not what people think. I'm just saying. The title of my stream is called Day 43 Duolingo Japanese. Didn't say anything about its fluency or I'm trying to live and move to Japan. There's a lot of inferences here. So I do understand I'm playing the clickbaity thing inadvertently. I'm not looking for the most efficient methods. Out of the kindness of your heart, like most people who have great intents for unsolicited advice, I also have the kindest intent to value and weigh all your words that you say very, very well. And I am already like 20 minutes behind on chat. So this is why I'm not a big proliferative influencer. It takes me a very long time to talk through chats. You're still here? Hey, Blue Jelly. Hello, Blue. I'm trying to be more articulate English speaker too. Any tips? I like how you speak. You like how I speak? Oh boy. That's a loaded question. I don't know how you do that. I'm really sorry. I really don't know how to do that at the moment. That's you're gonna have to I'm gonna have to think about that actually. Sorry, Cranky. Maybe I might have to think about that. And you meant book? Yep. I've been mistyping a lot because I type so quick and I've been very tired. That's fair enough. You're probably overseas, right? Durandi, so that's fine. I also forget to check my messages. That's fair enough. The owner of my company is a billionaire, and he does indeed use that to give him credibility. Anyway, in the closet, excited for you to learn some stuff. Yeah, okay. So I'm finally caught up with chat. Okay. So I know, and here's what I can say from all the discussions so far, and they're positive things. I know that Durandi, you have lots of knowledge about learning the Japanese language in a very efficient way, and you will continue to be more efficient than I am in learning Japanese if you're still learning Japanese and other languages. I am interested in those things. I will take them into consideration. They're not a priority at the moment because my goals do not align with your goals. That's all I can say about that for the time being. And for Cranky, I think for me, much like what D3 said, I adapted this form of speech from my mentors, from people I observe around me. So I agree with you. If you want to speak a language, you can be in that country and naturally adapt it at D3. Like, I agree with you on that. And for my advice, I guess a tip, I don't know what this is. I don't consider it a tip because it's not well formed for myself. For Cranky, my mannerisms and my speech pattern in English was due to my environment. I did not academically acquire this form of articulation. Generally speaking, because of my educational background, I have been privileged, very privileged, to be in the presence of individuals who speak incredibly like this. Big disclaimer. The moment I start learning Japanese and I stop like talking about all this stuff, because I'm doing this kind of for a video, I suppose, about a digression, I will not sound like this anymore. I will sound like a pep. I will sound like a gaijin trying to speak Japanese. So I will sound less articulate. I will bumble. I will talk to myself rhetorically. I will sound like a gamer or like a streamer who is reacting to everything, reacting to how I'm forgetful, how I've made the same mistake a couple times. And I want to encourage other people to be encourage them to see that in themselves too. I record myself because I made the comment about day 26 and stuff, to see myself do these things. And it's helpful because what I view to me is what I think of myself. It may not necessarily be true about what I'm actually doing. So hopefully that helps. I can adjust my speech patterns and affect the way I speak because I do it and I record myself doing it, and then I can see it. I can see and hear it. But generally speaking, how I acquired my English articulation comes from exactly applying what D3 was saying. I have been around people older than me who speak a certain way. And because of that, I sound like them in English when I find the opportunity to. I can also sound like a gamer who speaks gamer speak. I can kind of sound like a Zoomer from time to time if you don't see my face and how old I am, right? I can sound like an American if you didn't see that I'm Chinese. So there are ways, even without learning a new language, to learn a new language. You can learn more than one English because English has almost triple the number next to, like, maybe Mandarin, but of foreign speakers. So all those foreign speakers have their own version of English, right? Gerandi, now we're going to take it all the way back to the first discussion we had. Gerandi and I have two different Englishes. And that's what started all of this conversation. So taking it all the way back to the very beginning, because I do the whole thing about reminding everyone where it starts, A into B into C, and when we get to C, we go back to A. When we get to D, we go back to B's point. So now let's take it all the way back to the beginning. Durandi and I have different perspectives on the English language, and it is influenced by our different cultural backgrounds. We talked about his Dutch background, in which Dutch people are more direct. So that kind of translated into the use of the English language. For me, I grow up in the northeast region of the United States. And my professional background is I was in an academic environment, an incredibly liberal academic environment. And because of that, generally speaking, we spend a lot of time pausing, refining public speaking, and often sound like we're trying to be agreeable first and foremost, and leaving things up to interpretation in order to welcome discussion, versus shutting down discussions by pushing a strong position. So when someone comes up to me and say being indirect and making sure to be agreeable is a sign of disingenuousness, is something I face most of the time when I'm speaking like this. If I'm playing a video game, I'm reacting to the video game. So naturally, it's not really up to interpretation. I do the things on hand. When I'm talking about something as serious as language learning, I tend to sound very esoteric, nitpicky, and detail-oriented. The reason for that is I focus on learning. Learning is paramount. What you're learning is, to me, irrelevant. So if you think I'm not learning Japanese efficiently, it's not because I don't know that I'm not learning efficiently. It's largely because I have other goals that I am meeting on top of learning Japanese. And one of them is to understand the current state of Duolingo, all the opinions, that I encountered are a representation of anything Duolingo has to work against or support. So any strong challenges, experiences I have with Duolingo, that's what I'm looking for. That's actually priority number one. The fun part, or the fun thing, the thing that eventually becomes fun, is discussing all the consequences of Duolingo. Not necessarily learning Japanese. If I learn some Japanese, that's great. So, hopefully that helps. I have good vocabulary. You don't use fillers, and you can frame your thoughts coherently. That's why I said you speak well. Oh, okay. Well, thank you. Yeah, that still comes from my educational background. And I'll do this all the time. So maybe if you find someone you really, really like, Frankie, perhaps someone in your native speak, right? If you have a native language and you had an influencer that's incredibly articulate, sometimes when you learn another language and you have an articulate personality, it kind of transfers, in my opinion. That's like when I speak Japanese, I imagine what I'm going to strive to speak is going to be reflective of my English, hopefully, perhaps. I spent a lot of, I don't want this to sound like I'm above someone. I had a lot of hard time when I was younger to speak without either tapping too fast. So typing too fast is a symptom of that as well, just to give an idea of Gerandi's impediment. I used to speak less deliberately, and my thoughts are too rapid. So oftentimes, I've worked on reducing the amount of fillers, slow down my speech, improve the conciseness of my speech, instead of projecting an insecurity to fill in all that information, and work on organizing that information in my head to present to a lot of people. So my educational background was in science and in biology. And biology requires that you you refrain from simplifying difficult topics. You're attempting to make it understandable by presenting it in a manner in which it's coherent and approachable to other people. And that kinda overlaps with learning, be it Japanese or anything. Usually I'm teaching science back in the day, like 5 years ago. So here, I've taken something that I worked on in my life because I spoke like a robot. I spoke like a robot. I spoke very rapidly. Sometimes I don't speak at all because the topic's too complicated. That's what I told myself. Like, oh yeah, this topic's too complicated. If they don't understand, that's their problem. I'm not gonna subject myself to, trying to find and teach myself different ways to disseminate information. It's their incompetence that is the problem. So for me, this is just my personal statement. I think one point of pride that someone could hurt my feelings to some extent would be someone come up and say, "You speak terrible." Like, as in, I don't understand you. That can hurt. And that is what motivates me to learn every day. So now we're going to take it all the way back to the very first point, which was my conversation with Sandra. Sandra said, Sandra studies English every day. And that's where the conversation started. The use of every day at the end of a sentence versus each day. And we talked about the usage cases of those and what they mean. So that was the very first topic. And for me, I try to learn English every day. And much like D3, I use English every day in a different context. Yes, I don't go to Japan. But you know what's great about the internet? It circumvents some of the restrictions of not having the privilege to geographically communicate and speak with other people from other countries. So in this case, I'm not learning Japanese per se. However, the last 43 days, I had the privilege to talk, discuss, one-sided talk, get yelled at, get criticized among more multilingual people that I've ever met my entire life. And that is largely because I pragmatically chose Duolingo as a divisive representation of a language learning app. I see it as a learning app, not a language learning app per se, and not as an app or a definitive thing to learn any particular language. However, my critics, the individuals who approach me, infers all of this based on their prejudices and stereotypes. Oh, here's another person who's learning Duolingo with Japanese. Let me impart my advice to them that Duolingo is not a one-stop shop. Fair enough. Absolutely. What is the most common criticisms and unsolicited advice from my experience? Hey, you should really use other tools because Duolingo is not going to make you fluent. Okay. The natural question in the subjunctive would be to ask the person, are you trying to become fluent in Japanese with Duolingo? Because that's the first inference you're making. You're making not even an inference. I'm being polite here. I'm being conservative by saying they've inferred a lot of context clues that I'm trying to become fluent in Japanese somehow. That's a leap of logic, by the way. And that is an assumption. For all intents and purposes, that is an assumption. And most of my conversations that go this long in digression, I would say 90% so far of this conversation is predicated on the assumption that my desire and primary goal is to become fluent in Japanese. I'm sorry. I'm also not 18 years old, by the way. I'm also not a kid out of high school who wants to move to Japan or become Japanese. I'm a 37-year-old person who just like talking to people and practicing the language he speaks, and additionally learn a different language. Does that provide me with more credibility? I mean, we could add credibility, but that would be going against what I preach, which is I don't refer to my educational background very often. I typically only infer the relevant things that are involved in the conversation. So, when someone tells me Duolingo is bad for me, my first question is not really bad. I won't use the word bad. That's really subjective. Duolingo is not efficient. My first question for you is, can you describe to me the state of Duolingo right now so that you know what I'm doing in Duolingo? I need to confirm the idea that you understand what I did for the last 42 days. That's a tall order. I won't have anyone. I'm not suggesting that you go and sit through the 42 days. I recorded myself for doing 42 days to inform myself what I actually did in Duolingo. So perhaps there are other people who are literally doing the same thing. I'm not speaking figuratively here. Literally doing the same thing, and they've come to an advice, then they can assume. But when someone comes up and tells me they've spent 10 plus years or 20 plus years learning a language, we are no longer on the same page anymore. Both by human condition, by emotional resonance, There's no element of resonance. What is this live about? My friend from YouTube? Oh, we're just talking about learning languages. It's not too bad. It takes a bit. We've been spending the last 2 hours talking about it. But we're gonna go back to learning Japanese. So, or I don't know what. We're gonna pick up some Japanese phrases or Japanese vocabulary. I'm not entirely sure if I can comfortably say things like I'm learning Japanese. I honestly actually feel that outside of the people who actually use Duolingo, most people would say they would cringe when I say I'm learning Japanese. I'm Japanese? No, I am not Japanese, unfortunately, or fortunately. I am Chinese American. My parents are Chinese, and I am more or less American. More or less American. So, English is my primary language. English is my primary language. I do speak Mandarin to some extent, and I'm learning Japanese out of interest. Good luck with my journey. Oh, thanks. I love that word. Journey is fantastic. Thank you. And good luck with yours too. I hope you're learning a language or having fun watching other people learn about your language maybe. Sometimes Japanese people chill out and see how an English person goes about learning their language. It's also kind of fun. I like watching people learning English now. It's a routine that I like to do. I actually, if I ever see a Japanese person learning English, I kind of chill there and see what their journey is like. Just to throw my opinion on Duolingo out there, it's actually a really decent learning tool, and you can get really far with it alone if you ask questions and take interest instead of going through the lessons mechanically. That is beautiful. What are you learning at the moment, actually, Cranky? I'm here for the talking. I'm here for asking questions and interests part. The lessons do get mechanical. I absolutely agree with that, though. In fact, my major criticisms, or for myself, to alleviate the mechanical lesson thing, I talked about it for my first 30 days on day 26. I think I'm going to do that on day 45 now as well, because I wanted to show people that I'm actually trying not to actually mechanically use Duolingo as a mechanic versus using Duolingo to inspire to do other things. Like Tofuku is an awesome site. What I did, how I learned grammar from Tofuku is the same way I'm learning from Duolingo. Like, what I mean is the approach that they have for Duolingo, how like, I don't know where I'm going, I don't know what they're going to teach me. I'm applying that philosophy when Tofuku is like linking different things. It's kind of like revisiting a thing that I don't do anymore. Oftentimes when I'm learning, I learn with an objective, a really focused objective, and to me it's not as entertaining anymore. So tonight, this evening, when I get off stream, I don't know what grammar point I'm gonna either review, practice. I already know, maybe it's related to Duolingo, or it's new. I don't know. I'm just gonna click willy-nilly. What's a great way to find immersion than serendipity? Well, if you live in the country of the language you're trying to learn, that's serendipitous. You walk around, you have no idea what you're going to learn, but hey, you're in it. So I'm simulating that feeling when I don't have the privilege to go to Japan. Do I want to go to Japan? Of course. If you fly me to Japan and pay for my like six month visa and also remove the bounds of getting a visa in the first place, fair enough. But the closest thing I have is to talk to other people who are learning languages. And I think it's about 50-50. Half the people I meet aren't even learning Japanese. They typically want to share their experience in language learning. Learning a language later in life is an experience that can enrich language learning itself. Knowing that other people are learning languages, not just the language you're looking at, is fantastic. And then sharing those ideas is even more fantastic. So I'm here for that. You're in section 3. Okay. 300 days. Nice. Dang. That's gonna be, I think, section 3. Man, that's gonna be like another month for me. Duolingo really helps with developing consistency in a way no other tool does. I can see that. There's no way I have stuck with Japanese if not for Duolingo. It's wonderful that Duolingo worked for you. If I like to point out something, I'm pretty sure you can. If you wanted to look for something, there's a high chance you might be able to find another tool that also help you develop consistency. It's great that you found Duolingo to be your first, or like you and Duolingo happen to resonate. But you know, much like the other person who suggested strongly the other way, there might be something out there as well. I don't know what that is, obviously. I know that there are a lot of tools. So far, Anki, LingQ, no one mentioned Babbel, and then no one mentioned Rosetta Stone, right? And then we have all the like the italki, or Iltalki, I don't know how. There are a lot of things, right? And Bushu, Memrise. There are a lot. I've been given a ton of suggestions. The one thing about language or learning in general is it takes time. I think if I am going to use the indicative voice, learning takes time. To the consternation or maybe the chagrin of people who are trying to tell me that I can learn Japanese in 30 days if I do it right. You probably can. I don't know. Will I learn it in 30 days? Well, that's already gone by. Did I aim to learn Japanese in 30 days? What do you think this is? A YouTube influencer? I'm not a YouTube influencer. It's not a challenge. It's a journey. I'm not sprinting towards a 30-day like speed run of the Japanese language. I'd like to think that when someone sees my YouTube channel and saw that I spent like over 300 hours playing Yakuza 5, the remastered edition, that would give you the impression that I take my time, whether it's efficient or not. And every day you probably see me with a smile and be very, very enthusiastic. Being slow is not negative to me if it's meaningful. So before all the other people come in and say, well, you're just looking for meaning where there isn't meaning. It's like, well, yeah, that's kind of how life works, isn't it? Am I happy? Well, I certainly am. Although a lot of people would come to me and say, well, you could be happier if you learn Japanese faster. I think, well, that's an inference. It makes me happy that there are people slowing me down learning Japanese. With all greatest intention and warm feeling, I want to end on this one remark. If you think I'm nervous and insecure that I haven't started my lesson for today, you would be correct 70% of the time if it was any other internet influencer. And guess what? They probably won't let you stop them or slow them down. I am intentionally being nitpicky and argumentative, and pedantic, because that's why I'm streaming. If I'm looking for the most effective and best strategies, it would start by not streaming. I'm not here to educate people in how to use Duolingo the fastest way possible, or what's the fastest way to learn Japanese. The fastest way to learn Japanese is to not stream, not talk to other people, move to the country, learn there, go to school there if you want. There are lots of other strategies. So before you infer like everyone else, and I totally get it, that if you go into any other stream, because I'm not popular, let's just say this. Statistically, let's do a logic check. If you come to a person who's the only person on Duolingo who barely speaks to 2 or 3 people, and when they're streaming, they spend 99% of the time speaking to themselves. They're not popular. They're looking to be distracted, because that's at least my opinion. They're looking for company, and they're looking for discussions, people who share their lives, things. That's what they're doing. If you're going into a stream where this guy is like 20,000 viewers and they're like they're the goated polyglot of polyglots, then yeah, you can infer that they're probably trying to tell people how to learn language the fastest way. Am I doing that, and will I benefit from it? Yes, if my goal was that. It's not. So feel free. In fact, this 43rd day up here is deceptive. I actually spent 60% of my time, almost over 60% of my time, having this type of varied discussion throughout my session. So am I making more errors? Absolutely. Am I getting distracted? Absolutely. Do I learn less Japanese if I keep talking to other people about Japanese? Yes and no. I'm definitely learning Japanese inconsistently. Would I give it up? No, absolutely not. I actually end up learning more Japanese outside of Duolingo because of other people. More grammar. Watched an anime because of someone I talked to. Talked about the anime with respect of learning Japanese with that person. Tofuku. Learned all the other competing apps even though I don't use them. Have other people's opinions, their life stories. I know approximately some detail about 14 people right now. So that's language learning. It's part of language learning. It's not Japanese culture. I'm not going to understand Japanese culture, but I'm understanding the language learning community, the larger language learning community. And it sucks. I will give a hot take here, and then maybe a nice message. It sucks that the language learning community at large, the larger, greater language learning community on the internet, constantly bickers against each other. They are constantly cannibalizing each other. And Duolingo is one of the biggest victims of that, in my opinion. Easily. Not only is it the most popular, it is arguably the most detested. And it's self-cannibalizing for people who all agree that language learning is their goal and fun. So, to end it on a more uplifting note, I hope Duolingo improves from all the criticisms. You know, they get their act together. And then all the other ones also get their act together and have communities that are collaboratively competitive. Because for me, learning is my hobby. And when I see my hobby fight each other, like amongst themselves, in a aggressive, toxic way, as opposed to a constructive and collaborative way, it's very disappointing. So I hope in the future that my experience will change. Maybe one day I'll be competent in a language, and when someone sees me like, oh, why are you using Duolingo? You seem like a very competent person. Well, you know what? Let's talk about that. So the role will be reversed. It may never happen. If you see me streaming, my only motivation is to put myself in a compromise position. I am not the expert of anything I stream. Rarely have I have the motivation to hustle anyone. I don't like making hustle content. It's other people's deal. They get affirmation from it. They like being display their passion, but they're also in a position of specialty. I do not enjoy that. I actually like farming people for advice. I collect all of that and I take advantage of it. So thank you to everyone who criticize me, motivate me to change, or attempt to gaslight me. I'm okay with that. I mean, it's going to be negative feeling at first, but then I reflect on it and it becomes informative, right? Did I reverse gaslight? Did I Uno reverse the gaslighting, right? That happens a lot. Like, you said this, but I didn't say this, but then you didn't say this. It happens a lot. And how can I benefit from that? By having those discussions and then recording myself doing it. Sometimes I go back. When I have a really long debate and stuff, I actually go back to my previous VODs and look at all the context in which I can either learn from it, use it. All these stories are going to be moving forward, by the way. So I still remember the altercation that I had on day 8 of starting Duolingo when someone said I had to stick up my butt. All this is connected in memory. So these experiences are incredibly valuable. So I like to thank the language learning community at large. And I like to believe that if there are enough people who are not looking for the quick hustle, I don't know what that looks like. Again, I'm not a billionaire, so I'm not going to start a company that deals with doing that instead of the other way around. I don't have a lot of influence, but I really hope that in another 5 or 10 years, we are going to have a very different discussion. A very different discussion, not just about Duolingo, but the idea that out of all the fire that Duolingo and Babbel, because they're the top 2, and then the OG, like the honored flag one, is Rosetta Stone, right? Rosetta Stone's been around since I was still in college. Like, Rosetta Stone was that Rosetta Stone sounded like Duolingo in advertisements when they started, when I was younger. I'm 37, by the way, so I predate Rosetta Stone, at least. And I was learning another language. I was learning Spanish in formal education when Rosetta Stone was around, and I had considered it, but I couldn't afford it, right? It was very expensive back then. I think it's still okay now that I have money, I suppose. So all in the long run, in another 5 or 10 years, I like to believe if I'm still doing this, learning another language, it could be German. Hats off to D3 and Nojo. It could be German in another 3 years, so 3 to 5 years. I like to think that we won't be using phrases like, this is garbage, this is bad, this is the best, this is worse, everything is better, I always do this, this is what most everyone do, that's just stupid, this is just the best. Those phrases, those are the phrases that I am concerned about. Because generally speaking, I don't actually even think those people mean it. Be using that phrase. It often became normalized. So to me, I'm going to be nitpicky about that. When you tell me you always do something, I beg to differ. But you're talking to some old millennial who's in an educational background. So if you talk to a scientific writer and you use the word always, you probably screwed the pooch. You always do this. You do this every day. And I understand that. I read the subtext. Like, oh, okay. You like the idea of doing it every day. That's fair. I'm not going to go around and say, well, technically, the statistic likelihood of you doing all that is very unlikely. That is coming from a specialist point of view. So if someone is trying to speedrun language and then giving advice about speedrunning language, my apologies. I respectfully disagree. And you are caught up, in my opinion, in the internet hustle culture. How long do you think I'm expected to hold casual, basic level conversations in Japanese? I don't think anyone has asked me that actual question, except for maybe one person who asked me how I feel about my progress. That was the closest thing. I expect to be doing this for 1 year. 1 year to construct basic conversation. And then someone would ask me, well, what is your ultimate goal? Basic conversation. Actually, I already answered this question a bunch of times voluntarily. My ultimate goal to learn Japanese is to get to a point where I can use Japanese to learn Japanese. And that's it. So if I need to simplify anything, the goal is have the capacity to use Japanese to learn Japanese. I could sound like a 13-year-old kid for all that matters. A 13-year-old kid has the capacity to use Japanese to learn Japanese. They ask questions. I need all the questions, how to form all the questions. I bet you can read some graded readers even now. It's been an interesting benchmark on day 60 maybe. Yeah. So did I already tell you this, Lotus? I took a mock exam of N5, and I don't know where N5 is. Maybe that's a graded reader, but N5, and the length might have been shorter, but overall I got 80% on it. It felt really bad though, because I was relying on test taking methods too, because I couldn't read the instructions. I talked about this with someone else. Like, I was taking the questions, so I couldn't read the instructions, so I needed to use my test taking strategies, and that's coming from English. It's coming from like being in college for a long time and being in higher education. So it felt bad at the same time. You couldn't read the instructions either when I started being able to take those mock tests. Yeah, like I couldn't read the instructions. I'm like, well, let's just look at it, and there was enough context clues. It's actually easier than Duolingo, Lotus, if you know what I mean. Like, Duolingo is looking for the nitty-gritty, like exact answers, but you are provided most of the answers. The first time you get a multiple choice question is like way down the line, like, you know, fill in the blank stuff. So the moment you got like the fill in the blank stuff, I'm like, well, you can kind of just figure out which one's the right one. There's so much context clues. There's so much detail in the way they format the exams. And here, what am I concerned about, Lotus? I'm concerned about my total recall. And I know that's probably why N5 to N2 and stuff is not a great example of speaking comprehension, because speaking comprehension requires creative construction, and I totally get it. That's why I didn't use the N5 as a benchmark. But I also have people who are interested. So if my goal is to pass in N5, which is not, someone challenged me with, how do I feel about my progress? Well, how do I express that? Because I always feel great about my progress. It's the journey, not the goal, like not the end goal. And then I started thinking, maybe I should just take a mock exam and just see where I am. So about a week ago, I took the N5 exam, and you need to score a lot lower than you think. Like, it's not the American system. I forgot, but it's like 60% or something. Right? So it felt bad. It felt awful because I couldn't read the whole thing, but that's probably me. However, I did get around 80%. In fact, I deliberately got a question wrong to understand what the instructions were. Well, what I mean is, okay, this is a 50-50 because I can't read the instructions. There's like this huge diagram with like 3 blanks. Like, are these all like 3 in a row? Like, Am I looking at the star? I couldn't figure it out. So what I did was I used the process of elimination, and I looked at the two. I'm like, if this one's right, then the exam is asking me this. If that one's right, then the exam is asking me this. So I actually got those questions wrong, only to figure out the following question, because I understood now what the question's asking me, even though I can't read the heckin' instructions. The instructions to the exam are harder than the actual most of the prompts on an N5 exam. And dude, listening, like, I bolted through the listening section. That's when I don't even have to read anything. I'm gonna just hear it as I A graded reader may be more interesting to you then. Oh, interesting. What does a graded reader mean? It's basically like reading a kid's book, so you wouldn't be able to fail on the... Oh. Neat. Wait, how do I do that? How do I do a graded reader? Keep that in mind. I have to go to the bathroom, and I'll start to learn something while... You gotta keep... Hold on to that thought.